There's a moment most men have experienced but rarely talk about. You're sitting across from a woman you actually like. The conversation is going fine, technically. You're saying the right things, she's smiling, nodding, maybe laughing at the right moments. But somewhere underneath the surface, you can feel it, this quiet, uncomfortable awareness that nothing real is actually happening between you two. That you're both performing a version of yourselves for each other. That if you walked away right now, she'd forget your name by tomorrow morning. That feeling isn't just insecurity talking. That feeling is information. And most men respond to it by doing more of exactly the wrong things. They talk louder, they tell funnier stories, they drop hints about their income or their status or their ambitions. They try harder to be impressive, and the harder they try, the more she emotionally steps back. Not because she's cold or shallow or playing games, but because none of what he's doing is actually reaching her. None of it is making her feel anything real. Here's what nobody tells men about genuine attraction. The part that actually matters, the part that creates a slow, deep pull she can't quite explain or shake, it doesn't come from how much you give her to look at. It comes from how much you give her to think about. And there's a specific way to do that, not through clever lines, not through psychological tricks or manipulation tactics dressed up in respectable language, but through something far simpler and far rarer than most men realize, the ability to ask a woman something she wasn't prepared to be asked. Something that cuts through the automated small talk she cycles through every single day. Something that makes her pause, look at you slightly differently, and think, wait, who is this person actually? That moment, that small shift in her perception, that's where everything changes. I want to talk about why most conversations between men and women stay completely on the surface. And I want to be honest about it because understanding this is what separates men who genuinely connect from men who just interact. Every woman you meet has a version of herself she shows publicly, and a version of herself she guards carefully. The public version handles the routine questions with rehearsed ease. What do you do? Where are you from? Do you come here often? She can navigate those exchanges in her sleep. They don't cost her anything emotionally because they don't reach anything real in her. She gives you the answer, you give your answer, and you're both just killing time together. But the guarded version, the version that actually thinks and doubts and dreams and fears and wants things she's afraid to say out loud, that version only appears when she feels genuinely safe. When she senses that the person she's talking to isn't just collecting information about her, isn't just waiting for their turn to speak, isn't performing interest while actually just looking for an opening, she appears when she meets someone who feels different, someone whose questions carry weight, someone whose presence feels steady and unhurried and genuinely curious. Most men never meet that version of a woman they like, not because she's hiding it from them specifically, but because they never created the conditions for it to emerge. What I'm going to share with you today are 7 questions, but before I get to them, I need you to understand something about how they work, because this matters more than the questions themselves. A question is just a sentence with a question mark at the end unless it's asked with the right energy behind it. And that energy has nothing to do with being smooth or perfectly confident or knowing exactly what to say next. It has everything to do with genuine presence, with actually caring about the answer, with having the patience to sit in a moment of silence after she responds instead of immediately jumping in to fill the space with your own voice. The men who ask these questions and get nothing back are usually the men who ask them like items on a checklist, like they were following a script they memorized. Women can feel the difference between a man who's genuinely interested in her answer and a man who's just executing a technique. And the moment she feels the technique, the wall goes back up. The automated responses return, and you're back to surface level nowhere. So as I walk you through these questions, I want you to think about them less as conversation tools and more as genuine invitations. You're not trying to extract something from her. You're creating space for something real to step forward. The first question is this: what's something you used to care deeply about that quietly stopped mattering to you? Not what changed your mind on some political topic, not what career pivot you made. This is asking her to reflect on the personal evolution that happened beneath the surface of her visible life. The things she used to invest emotional energy into, maybe a version of herself she worked hard to build, a belief that felt essential until it didn't, a goal she chased until she realized it wasn't actually hers. When you ask this, you're communicating something powerful without saying it directly. You're telling her that you understand people are more than what they currently are, that growth and change aren't things to hide or explain away, that you're interested in the journey, not just the destination. Most people in her life see who she is right now. You're asking to understand who she's been and what that process of becoming has actually felt like. That distinction alone is enough to make you memorable. The second question. When you walk into a room full of people, what's the thing you're actually thinking that you never say out loud? This question does something unusual. It acknowledges directly that there's a version of her inner world that doesn't make it into conversation, and it gives her explicit permission to let some of that out. You're not asking what she wants people to think she's thinking. You're asking what's actually happening beneath the surface that she normally keeps to herself. She might laugh a little when you ask this, not because it's funny, but because it's unexpected and slightly disarming. And that small laugh, that moment of being caught off guard in a pleasant way, that's a crack in the automatic social script she's been running. Something real just became possible. Her answer will tell you more about how she actually experiences the world than a dozen surface conversations ever could. And because you asked, because you showed genuine curiosity about her interior life, you become associated with that rare feeling of being truly understood. The third question is gentler but goes somewhere deep. What's something you've accomplished that almost nobody in your life actually knows about? Not the achievements on her resume, not the things she posts about, the quiet victories, the personal mountains she climbed without anyone watching. The things she did that she's genuinely proud of but never found the right moment or the right person to share it with. When she tells you this, and she will tell you something if you ask it the right way, you're receiving something she doesn't hand out freely. You're receiving a piece of her actual story, and something shifts in the dynamic when that happens. She gave you something real, and you held it with care. Now you're no longer a stranger she's making polite conversation with. You're someone she shared something real with. That matters more than most men realize. The fourth question takes a bit more courage to ask, but the impact is significant. Is there a version of your life you can picture clearly but have never actually talked about out loud? You're inviting her to speak into existence something that lives only in her imagination. The life she's considered but never pursued. The version of herself she sometimes visits mentally before she falls asleep. Maybe it involves a completely different place or a completely different kind of work or a relationship that looks nothing like what she's known. Whatever it is, it's been living inside her quietly, maybe for years. And here's what makes this question powerful. The act of saying something out loud for the first time makes it feel more real. And the person who is present for that first time gets permanently associated with that moment of clarity. You didn't just have a conversation with her, you witnessed something. That's a completely different experience, and she will not confuse you with anyone else after that. The fifth question is about how she relates to the people closest to her. Who in your life actually knows you, and I mean really knows you, not just your routine? This one lands differently depending on her answer. Some women will immediately have someone in mind, and the warmth in how they talk about that person tells you everything about what genuine connection means to them. Some women will pause longer than expected, and that pause will tell you something different but equally important. That real understanding might be rarer in her life than it looks from the outside. Either way, you've just opened a conversation about intimacy and connection and what being truly known by another person actually feels like. That's not small talk territory. That's the kind of exchange that makes 2 hours feel like 20 minutes. And by asking it, you've quietly demonstrated that you're someone who thinks about connection in that way. That's attractive in a way that nothing you could say about yourself would accomplish. The sixth question is reflective and carries emotional weight if asked with sincerity. What do you think was the exact moment you stopped being who you thought you were going to be? This question assumes something important. That she, like every thoughtful person, had a picture of who she was becoming, that eventually collided with reality in some significant way. A moment where the gap between expectation and actual life became impossible to ignore. Maybe it was a relationship that ended and took a version of her with it. Maybe it was a professional moment or a family situation, or simply the quiet accumulation of years going in a direction she didn't fully choose. When she tells you about that moment, she's trusting you with something tender, with a piece of her vulnerability. And if you receive it with calm attentiveness, without immediately offering solutions or silver linings or comparison stories from your own life, you demonstrate something she encounters very rarely. A man who can hold space for something difficult without trying to fix it or escape it. That quality is more attractive than almost anything else you could present. The seventh question is the simplest of all, but for that reason, it might be the most disarming. What do you actually want right now? Not eventually, not in some ideal future, but genuinely right now in your actual life. Most people, when asked what they want, default to the socially acceptable answer. The career goal, the relationship milestone, the travel aspiration, things that sound good out loud and cost nothing emotionally to share. But the word actually, placed deliberately in that question, does something interesting. It signals that you're not asking for the rehearsed answer. You're asking for the honest one. And most people haven't been asked for the honest one recently enough that they know what it is without having to think. Let her think. Don't rush the silence. Don't reframe the question or offer options or joke to ease the discomfort. Just wait, because what she says after she actually thinks about it is the most honest thing she'll tell you all evening. And the fact that you created the space for her to access that honesty makes you the most interesting person she's spoken to in longer than she might want to admit. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. It isn't a list of magic phrases or a system to run on women you're attracted to. It's a way of thinking about conversation and connection that most men genuinely never develop. The idea that the most attractive thing you can bring to an interaction isn't a better version of what everyone else brings. It's something they're not bringing at all. Genuine curiosity, unhurried presence, the willingness to go somewhere real in a conversation instead of staying safely on the surface where nothing meaningful ever grows. When you ask these questions and you actually listen to the answers, not to formulate your response, but to genuinely understand, something changes in how she experiences you. You stop being just another person she talked to and become someone she talked with, someone who made her feel, even briefly, like the most interesting person in the room. Not because you flattered her, but because you were actually interested in who she is. She'll think about that later. In the quiet moments when she's alone and her mind drifts back through the day, she'll remember not what you said about yourself, but how she felt when she was talking to you. That kind of impression doesn't fade. That kind of connection doesn't get confused with anyone else. And that, more than any technique or tactic or carefully constructed persona, is what genuine attraction is actually built from.